Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Quick check, can you hear me? Yeah? Good. I mean, this, what is it called? Madonna setup. It does work, apparently. And we are also fortunate that we don't need any of the other Madonna attributes to test today. Welcome to this session on competitive dialogue. Before we kick it off, there's a couple of announcements I have to make. First one is that my colleague Christophe, who was going to take the second part of the session on his account, is the victim of an event of force majeure. So he can't make it today. It's quite hard, especially for you as an audience, because you'll have to listen to me more. But let's see where this gets us. Just some people still coming in, right? Okay, better use this box. Yeah, works. Right. How procuring EMS2 thought us about the good, the bad, and a wee bit of ugly on the competitive dialogue. When I'm asked to reflect on a given experience, it's sort of the structure I try to use for myself. It's, you know, what was good, what was bad, and what was sort of like so-so. And that is what we will try to address today. This is the plan, sort of more of the same, I would say. I will start by digging into EMS because it's probably important that you know more or less what the experience is all about. See whether that would effectively fit into the competitive dialogue, if this is what was intended to be addressed through something like the competitive dialogue. And then effectively look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, to stop with sort of a summary of a couple of lessons learned. I'm not saying the lessons learned, but some of the lessons learned. And leaving time for a Q&A. But that's the good news, of course. With only one speaker, there's more time for a Q&A, right? And some microphones around in the room, so we can effectively have some questions and answers. That's going to make it a tiny bit more vivid. Yeah, so what does EMS2 stand for? Right. EMS2 is all about monitoring people. It's actually an electronic monitoring system. And as you can see in the drawing, what happens is that a bracelet is attached to a person that needs to be monitored. The bracelet will communicate through GPS, will communicate through the mobile network, the location. All right. Shut up, you guys. We're in the breakout rooms now. Okay. I will simply have to talk louder. So the bracelet will communicate through a mobile network, most of the times, and will communicate its location. Location, as in the slide, might be based on GPS or any of the other global navigation systems, might be based on triangulation, might be actually even based on a reference of a position in comparison with the Wi-Fi network. Whatever means available can be used to locate the bracelet and thereby the person. Bracelet is fixed. It's locked. It's very difficult to detach. It depends a bit on the philosophy used by the department using the bracelet. If you go to the US, the bracelet is a bit like everybody who has seen, who has read Lucky Luke in the old days knows, you know, the four Daltons walking around with the big iron ball around their ankle. You know, in the US, that's sort of what they have in mind. So the bracelet is fixed. And there's no scissors in the world that's gonna cut those bracelets. Here in Europe, we take into account the fact that the wearer might have an accident, might need to go to a hospital, and you can't take that bracelet into a scanner, right? So you need to be able to cut it. You won't be cutting it with a simple pair of scissors, but you know, if you've got a bit of a sturdier pair of scissors, you will be able to cut that bracelet. The bracelet contains technology to communicate with the GPS, or in most cases with the three available global navigation systems, and it contains communication equipment. It might also contain RF signal, so an RF unit that can communicate with an RF box in a certain room. The communication goes to the vendor software, so the software of the company that has developed the system. That software will then communicate with an operations room where people are sitting behind monitors 24/7, looking at whatever comes in. The whole idea is not that on a 24/7 basis we monitor each and every person that is wearing one of those bracelets. It will be pretty tiresome and probably not in line with GDPR. But what happens is that the platform, the vendor software, is fed with what is called a mandate for each of the people that is wearing a bracelet. And the mandate will determine what a person can and cannot do. If a person is to respect a house arrest, for instance, from 8 in the evening till 8 in the morning, then those rules will be fed into the software. And if, for instance, I would be wearing one of those bracelets and I would be under a rule that says that I can't leave my house between 8 in the evening and 8 in the morning, and I would have been celebrating St. Patrick's Day a couple of days back, sort of like midnight, most likely there would have been an alert generated and somebody would have come to knock on my shoulder and say, it's time for you to go home, right? So that is what happens. You have rules in the system, and the system constantly checks my location. If I wear a bracelet, it constantly checks my location as compared to those rules. If I, for instance, have been very naughty and I'm out on bail, but I wear a bracelet under the rule that I cannot come close to a primary school, and you can imagine how naughty I must have been in that case, right? Well, if you find me loitering about that primary school that is between this site and the North Station, you know, it won't take long before a police van turns up and, you know, kindly asks me to accompany them to the office, right? So that is what this does. And there's a whole range of applications you can make with that. You can do victim protection. That is what our Flemish Minister of Justice has been promoting a lot, because it's actually quite effective. In that case, somebody who has committed or is suspected to commit violence in a relationship gets a bracelet. The victim or potential victim gets a machine which is pretty much like this size. And whenever those two come too close to one another, the victim will get a phone call directing her away from the danger, and or the potential committer of violence will get a call telling him to go the other direction. So there's a variety of possibilities that you have with that system. So that is what we were asked to check and to find in the market. We had, so Belgium had a system in place, I think since the late 90s, but up until now, we are still on that same system that was procured back in the 90s. And two earlier attempts to renew and to find a new platform had failed. So looking at that, we opted to go for the competitive dialogue, basically to de-risk the trajectory, because we had seen that the traditional procedures had not come to an end, had not come to the right result. Finding myself alone on the stage here, it sort of reflects the general position of procurement people towards the competitive dialogue, right? When you tell somebody like, yes, I'm going to do this through competitive dialogue, the first thing you're going to hear is, are you mad? Right? It's not that popular. We are now engaging in a new procedure for the back office software behind this, which again is sort of like a combination of stuff and rather complex. And again, we really had to fight hard to get everybody aligned behind, yes, we're going to do this using a competitive dialogue. Because actually the procurement people around us that were also going to get involved, we're doing this with the three communities together, these exercises, right? The other procurement people sort of went like, are you mad? We don't want to go there. It's going to take too long, it's this, it's that. Basically, there's a lot of reluctance to engage in this procedure, which is a bit strange, but let's see what it is all about. Is my project of EMS, is it competitive dialogue worthy? I mean, if I look at the legislation, and I promise this is the only legal text I will show you, right? I am a lawyer, or at least I used to be a very long time ago, but I will not bother you with legal text anymore. But this one is important because it actually tells you when you're allowed to use a competitive dialogue, right? And you see here a number of things. You have, basically, you need to fulfill one or more of the criteria that you see on the screen. And then the question is, would my EMS solution require the adaptation of readily available solutions? I can tell you the answer to that is yes. Yes, of course, we found a couple of companies that have this sort of solution. It's rather niche market, but there are companies that build this kind of solutions end to end. But you need to adapt them. You need to adapt them to your local situation. They will need to figure out where they're going to host their platform. They need to figure out what exactly it is you're looking for. You will have to feed your own sort of mandates into that system. So there is quite some adaptation of the existing solutions required. Does it include design or innovative solutions? There's a bit of a question mark there. As I mentioned, there are companies who have been doing this for quite some time in the market. So yes, they're very innovative in their own right, but it's not because we from Belgium come to the market and say, we want an EMS solution, that all of a sudden they go into this development craziness. No, it's there. They have the plan, they have a roadmap, and we sort of buy into their roadmap. We did ask about their roadmap. So we did try to look into the future, try to look into what do you have on the shelf, what is going to happen in 5 years from now, because we are stuck with them for 9 years. So we want to know what is coming at us, how are you going to innovate? And we actually got some quite interesting answers. I mean, just until now, I've told you about EMS being all about localization. But imagine that you can have bracelets, and they exist today, that measure the amount of alcohol in the blood. It exists. So we could effectively, if the legislation is there, introduce bracelets that measure the amount of alcohol that you have in your blood. And combine it, for instance, with this guy is moving at 60 or 70 kilometers per hour. Therefore, he must probably in a car. And the measurement of the alcohol in his blood is sort of like 3 to 4 promille. This is not a healthy situation. Right? So we could effectively implement a sort of monitoring like that. I will not deal with any questions that you might have on, do we really want to go there? But it is possible. Bracelets are being developed that can measure certain drugs other than alcohol in the blood. Right? So imagine again, if you release somebody who has a past of drug abuse, and you release him under the condition that he wears for 1 or 2 years one of those bracelets, just to make sure that he stays away from that stuff. It is technically almost possible. So we've looked into that. So they are innovative, these solutions, but I would not dare to say that we were really pushing that innovative design. Mind you, side note in this presentation, but it's a very important aspect looking at the broader concept of why we are here. This article, this section is written all over. It's literally showing you that this procedure is written to support innovation. Right? This is innovation procurement. Right? Could we have awarded this solution without prior negotiations? The answer to that is no. Definitely needed to negotiate a whole lot of things, especially since we also went for an innovative concept. Right. Until now, innovative in terms of technology, as these companies are, they were pretty primitive in terms of their contracts. The concept that they were all supporting was, you simply lease our bracelets, as many as you can, right? Everything else is sort of included in the leasing cost of the bracelet. But don't expect too much service. Don't expect us to be ready when there's an issue, right? You just manage it all. So we turned that around and we negotiated for an end-to-end service platform. I'm not leasing bracelets. I'm buying the service of having bracelets available whenever I need some, and monitoring those bracelets and making sure that there's no issues, that there's no trouble. It's a different concept, and they needed some time to adjust to this business model. When we challenged them on service delivery management, which for people in the technology sector should be a no-brainer, 2 out of 3 of the players sort of were like, what is the man talking about? And the answers reflected that absolute lack of knowledge. So it took some time during the dialogue to get them up to speed with things that were important for us. So definitely 3 applies. And then 4, technical specifications cannot be established with sufficient precision. And that is a key important one for me as a buyer. I was dropped into this thing. I sort of started off with pretty much the drawing that I just showed you, and probably just as much explanation as I was giving you. And was like, now go out and buy it. Right? To date, I still don't know everything, all the ins and outs of that product, but I don't need to know that. What I need to know is, what do we need? So I spend a lot of time talking to the people, to the business side of the Justice Department, to the people in the monitoring centers, to the people in the justice houses, to figure out what exactly do you need? What do you need these things to do? What is the need that you need to cover with the system? And if I was able to translate that need into a descriptive document, I was sure that there would be engineers at the other side picking up and telling me how they would meet that need. And for me, that is also a very important part of the competitive dialogue. I don't need to know the last bit of technology. I don't need to be an engineer. I'm a buyer. Right? I mean, if worse than that, I'm a lawyer, but okay. I don't know about technology, but I can buy it, right? So that is important, and that is also, that means that at least 3 out of 4 of these conditions are met. Right? But this is, again, this is a very important clause because it's actually telling you what you need in order to go to the competitive dialogue, and it also tells you implicitly, competitive dialogue is the way to go if you want to go for innovation. Now, what is good? Now, you might be a bit surprised with the seagull, right? I mean, the idea of a gull gently floating on the thermal, not a worry in the world. It's hard to sort of align that with the concept of public procurement, I know, right? It's a different concept, but still, it sort of expresses the feeling of, what are the constraints in the competitive dialogue? What do I have to bear in mind? What do I have to do with this, right? And the answer is that, in terms of process, the competitive dialogue is relatively simple. At least the legislation, the law around competitive dialogue, the requirements that you have to meet when you're going through this competitive dialogue, it's relatively simple. It's almost having a blank canvas, right? The only 2 things that are really expressed in the European directive that sort of you could see as a restriction is, well, you have to treat your participants equally. I don't see that as a restriction, I see that as evidence. And you have to maintain confidentiality. You can't go blabbering about the solution of player A to player B. You have to be very careful in terms of what you communicate. It's actually the second one that is a bit more difficult, because obviously when you're enthusiastic about a solution that is being proposed, and you see another player that is sort of just not getting there, you have to think and decide for yourself how much information can I share with that second player without harming the interests of the first player. And that's an important issue, but again, it's not really a procedural restriction, it's just plain common sense. So I tend to see it as, if you want to describe the competitive dialogue, it's sort of like a mezzanine solution between market exploration, which you of course have to do, and the real thing, the real public procurement exercise. It sits there in between, and it sort of sits in between, both from a procedural level, but also in terms of concept. If you go in the market exploration, you talk to the whole world, and you try to figure out what is available. What in the world can be found that could possibly be of use to resolve this need? Your mezzanine solution, your competitive dialogue, takes it one step further. You do a selection. You try to find grounds that allow you to say, well, these companies meet my selection criteria. And if you choose them well, you will find companies that will provide you with relevant stuff, that will provide you with solutions that really meet your need. So it's very important, that selection process, but that's just one step. But you're still talking, you're still discussing. You can actually go further. You really dig into the need. You dig into the bits and bolts of the solution that you need. You are exchanging information with those players. It's a smaller group of players, but you can go more into depth with them. But it's still talking. You don't need to provide them all of the information that would be needed to provide you with an offer. You're not going to be bound by that information. And that is actually quite important. Because imagine that, I'm referring back to the COVID era. Imagine that I'm short of vehicles to deliver vaccines. I need to deliver vaccines all around the country. And I'm short on vehicles. There's two things I can do. I can go to the market and say, okay, I need vehicles that will deliver vaccines all around the country. Right? I can do that the traditional way. I can go in with the traditional public procurement exercise, and therefore I would need to write a specification. I will need to specify the vehicle I'm looking for. What I will write is, it needs to be a vehicle, a van, 4 wheels. Yeah. I will probably include some stuff on the engine and on the combustion and on the sustainability of the whole thing. And I will include some specifications on the temperature control that is needed in the cargo department. What am I going to get? I'm going to get offers for a van, 4 wheels, with a refrigerated cargo department, temperature control, and a response to whatever I was asking in terms of sustainability. End of story. If I go to something like a competitive dialogue, or even in a very classical public procurement exercise, if I go to what I would call a functional specification, I would say I will need a vehicle that allows me to deliver fast vaccines everywhere in the country, and just make sure that it's safe and that there's a controlled temperature in the vehicle. If I ask it like that, I'm not sure. I might still get just the vans, but if I play it well, if I look into, I'm not too traditional in my selection of candidates, I might end up with anything going from a motorcycle via a van to an electric bicycle or a drone. Right? So it's different. Right? What you write, what you are required to write, determines what you're going to get. If I go into a traditional procedure, the aim is to receive an offer, whereby I am bound by the specifications I put on the table that are sufficient for another party to write to answer to that specification and provide me with an offer. And as soon as the offer is on the table, the other party is bound by the offer, thereby killing all creativity, because you're both sort of locked into this situation. Competitive dialogue, functional specifications is entirely different. And it's designed to be tweaked. You can move around the procedure, as it says in the directive. Yeah? You can stage it. You can say, okay, I'm gonna have 1 or 2 or 3 stages in this dialogue. Currently, there's one in my team who is doing a competitive dialogue on ERP. It's a difficult one. It's a hard process. It's hard on everyone, but it's really. But ERP is always difficult, right? He is now into that process, and they're in for a 2.5 year competitive dialogue, which I find pretty long, but the length is determined by the complexity of the problem at hand. He is foreseeing 4 or 5 stages, right? Just sort of to make sure that you sort of mark the end of a part of the debate, and then either select or not select or move on or whatever. But you can do that. You can say, okay, well, this is the structure that I'm making, right? For EMS, we worked with two stages. I had the first stage where we were talking to 5 players that were selected. We did that for 2-3 months. Remote. I did not ask people to come to Brussels to discuss. We discussed on Teams. We had paperwork, mails exchanged, and we worked on the basis of that. And after 2-3 months, we decided that, okay, there were 2 companies that were less interesting for us. So we made a ranking. We said, okay, this is 1, 2, 3. 4 and 5 are less interesting, so we're going to drop 4 and 5. Right? You can do that in the competitive dialogue. It's easy. It's nice. You have, of course, to argument and be very clear on why you exclude those companies, but you can do it. It's easy. Right? One of the companies fell overboard because we had some trust issues in terms of GDPR. If the CEO of a company was an American company, if a CEO of a company in a Teams meeting goes into the live system, goes to a specific county in the US, identifies a specific person wearing a bracelet, and then sort of gives you all of the information on that person on the screen, that is not the person that you want to deal with your data on your people. So, you know, he disqualified himself at some point. So, but that was interesting. We got to learn the ins and outs of the business, talking to the 5 companies. We picked up things from the 5 companies that were interesting and that we then could include somehow in the dialogue. And then we went on with the 3 better companies and moved on with them. And as soon as we had done that selection, then we were into phase 2. And in that second phase or second stage, we invited them over to Brussels for really very concentrated 2-day sessions, workshops on a variety of topics, and at the same time a demo where all of the operational people from the various operational centers could come over to Brussels and, you know, hands-on, look at the equipment, test the equipment, ask questions about the equipment. It was quite exhausting for all the people involved, but for me what was important is that we were talking to companies from the UK, from the Middle East, other places. Whenever you ask these people over, it comes at a cost. It costs them time, it costs them money. And I felt as a buyer, it was my responsibility to keep that cost as low as possible. Because we were going to need to talk again and talk again. And, you know, but I will dig into that later, but, you know, there's a limit there that you need to respect. But you can tweak and twist with the process as much as you like. And actually, it's you as a buyer that controls the process. It also means that the buyer, or, well, either the buyer is a process manager, is a project manager, or he can rely on a project manager to help him manage it. Because the procedure is not helping you. You are building the procedure. You are controlling the procedure. You are the one telling, like, you know, now we're going to stop this phase. We're going to move to the next phase. Now we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. It's not as easy as, for instance, in a negotiated procedure where, you know, I put out the spec, I get an offer, then on the basis of the offers, I have to negotiate, even if it's just asking for a best and final, right? And then it's all over. It's not that easy. This one is a bit more complicated. It requires more investment of time and effort, but it's really worthwhile. So what else do we have? Yeah, it's, as I already mentioned, it's the natural habitat for functional specifications, low level of prior knowledge required. It allows to explore the many ways to meet the need. That's a bit going back to that example I gave for the vaccine transportation, right? Because you can ask a very open question, you just sort of declare your need, right? It's much more open in terms of what the answers that you will be receiving. And it's designed to tweak the answers. I'm not going to stand still with this one for too long, just checking the time. Right, the bad. Oh, you know, the bad, it's not that bad, but you know, it's as good as bad, right? It's managing a long and uncertain itinerary. I've heard of competitive dialogues that took 4 years. That is a nightmare. Right? That is a nightmare. That's a nightmare for the buyer, and I can assume that it's a nightmare for whomever is sitting in that dialogue as a vendor. Right? I used to work at the telecom sector. Right? In telecoms, we evolved to sales cycles of 6 months. Right? So I remember that I was trying to sell something to the electricity sector, and I went to my boss and said, well, it's going to take 2 years. And he was like, are you out of your mind? You don't have 2 years. 2 years from now, that technology will have evolved to something they can't use anymore. Right? So depending on the sector, sales cycles can be very short, and that too is very relevant in terms of innovation. Your technology might evolve if it takes too long for you to run the procedure. But what is more important, your innovators do not have the time to sit in a 4-year procedure. Imagine this guy who is CEO of a 2, 3, 5-person company. There's sort of 5 brilliant engineers sitting together. They have this brilliant invention. They are innovating at a ridiculous speed. And they would fit perfectly meet your need absolutely, and then you put them through a process of 4 years, I mean, they won't even start. They won't even come to your process. They won't even come to your dialogue. Or if they were ambushed into a procedure that was supposed to be short but ended up to be very long, they will drop out because they don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the deep pockets to run through that procedure. So that is one that is very important for buyers to bear in mind. Right? It's very nice, you know, it's actually fun doing a competitive dialogue because you learn a lot. You sit together with very intelligent people that do marvelous things in terms of innovation. So it's fun to talk to these people, and it's fun to have a lengthy conversation with these people and talk to them again and again and again. At the end of the day, they need to sell something. Right? So that is the risk that you have if, you know, the itinerary becomes too long. I have referred to it in my team as the Moses complex. Right? You know, don't spend 40 years in the desert, please. Be to the point. Lead your team to a short and quick solution because it's good for the team, it's good for your customer internally, it's also good for the market. Right? You're at risk of losing your way. You know, you're into this conversation. That's a bit of a risk, of course, of the competitive dialogue because you're starting from a need which is sort of like broadly formulated, and you get all sorts of answers. Some of them might be less relevant, some of them might be more relevant, but you need to keep a clear head of what it is that you need and where do you want to be heading. You know, you might get distracted, especially if you have engineers in the room. No. If you have an engineer in the team, you might get distracted because they will fall in love with part of the solution, right? So you have to be careful there. Does your team still have faith in the process? If you leave all of a sudden half of your team is not showing up on meetings anymore, right? Or says, you know, we don't have time, we have other priorities. Yeah. Know that the process has been taking too long. Right? Know that you have not managed the team. Right? Because I was already saying the buyer has to be a project manager, but he has to sort of manage the team. He has to make sure that everybody is aligned, that everybody knows if it takes a month, if it takes 6 months, if it takes a year, everybody knows this is the time that is needed, and this is the time that we will be available. Right? If you haven't got that buy-in, you have a problem. So you have to make sure that you have a team that will help you through the process. You have to make sure that the management of that team knows what's going on and is behind you, is supporting that process, and that you will effectively have a team that will take you to the end of your procurement process. Right? And it's sometimes difficult. With EMS, there were times that we really had to sort of negotiate with the management to get the people from the field to step into the process and be part of the judging of the various solutions, and you know, looking at the solutions and comparing solutions and telling us, the buyer, the legal people, what in their eyes was the best solution and why it was the best solution. And we really, really needed these people. More importantly even is, are participants still participating? And I've touched upon this already a couple of times. You need those participants because without them you're not going to have a deal, you're not going to have a solution. If you're stuck in a 4-year process, good luck with the last bullet point, right? You might have some, but the innovators, I'm not sure they will still be on board, right? It's not that difficult, right? It's an easy calculation, right? When will people be interested in your process? People will come to your process if the value of the project and their chances of winning the project is in balance with the cost of sales and the length of the sales process. Right? That means a couple of things. First of all, if you have a low-cost project or you simply have a low budget, think twice before you go into a competitive dialogue. Because if there's no money on the table, why would they want to spend a year talking to you? Right? They're not going to do that, right? So if it depends a bit on a lot of things. It depends on the amount of effort that you will be asking. Will there be traveling involved? Will there be demos involved? Will the demo require a very expensive setup or not? All of that comes into balance, right? But if you are looking for a lengthy process where teams from, say, the other side of Europe will have to travel to Brussels like 10 times, where you are looking at a setup that will require them to spend hundreds of thousands of euros, Well, if then the award is basically something in the terms of 5 million, no, I'm not convinced that they will be joining you. You're not going to have many people to talk to. So that is the balance that you need to have, that you need to strike even before you start. You know, what am I spending? You know, what is the budget I'm talking about? And what am I asking in return? It also means that budgets might be fun to talk to a lot of players. You need to restrict. Again, it's very basic. If I talk to 3 companies, somewhere in the second half of my procedure, if I talk to 3 companies, they each have sort of like a 33% chance of winning. Right? If I talk to 10 companies, they only have 10% chance of winning. That also determines the outcome, and it's something that we are seeing in certain procedures where you know, it's nice to keep your options open, but if, as a buyer, you really stretch the decisions and you really go backward and backward and backward and try to keep all of your options open as long as possible by not making choices, you're making life hard on your salespeople because they need a choice. They need to hear from you that either they are in or they're out. Either they have a 30% chance or even better, or they're out. You can't keep people performing all sorts of tricks without a reasonable chance of winning. And that too will determine whether or not you have an audience to talk to. And then, of course, you have candidates that are not producing workable solutions. It's a bit of a problem. They may slip through your selection procedure, and all of a sudden you find that, hang on, that looked very nice on paper. That really, really looked like a nice solution on paper, but it doesn't fly. Right? And then there's a bit of a choice that you have to make. I sort of ended up in that situation in the second half of my procedure, where one of the 3 players on paper had a nice solution, and when they came and talked to us, yes, or they could do everything. When we saw the demos, the first thing we saw was engineers frantically opening up boxes and trying to fix whatever wasn't working. Actually, during the, you know, can you imagine, you're standing there, there's a demo going, and there's an engineer goes like, so beneath the desk, like trying to fix something that doesn't work. And you know, if that occurs once, okay, it's innovation, it can happen. If that occurs throughout the demonstration, and then basically after a lot of tweaking behind the counter, they still can't produce a result, you know, it becomes a bit of a nuisance. So we had that, and then you have to take a decision. What is, from a buyer's perspective, what is a nice competition? Because if you at that point in time say, okay, look, I'm going to close this phase and throw out another player, what does that do to your procedure? Because then all of a sudden it becomes binary. There's only 2 players left, and they might know each other, right? So it's always nicer to have 3 players. And the funny thing about this, but it was not funny, it was actually quite normal. The one supplier that was not really producing the nice results was said to be the price breaker. They had recently won elsewhere in Europe a big project because the price was rock bottom compared to the others. Right, so then I'm stuck with 2 problems. One, do I really want to take these people out of the equation? Because I know that the others know that that player is the price breaker. Meaning, if I then going into the real competition and I'm asking offers, the others will know that they will have to lower their prices. Second thing, how on earth am I going to explain to the Inspector of Finance, is he here? No. How on earth am I going to explain to my Inspector of Finance that I'm excluding the party that is renowned to be the cheapest? Right? So it's double. So we decided to keep them on board, which was good because effectively the price is plummeted. I've got a really, really nice price for the best solution, so it was a win-win. The only downside comes later. Actually comes now. And that is a wee bit of ugly. It's a nice black bird. I don't really think it's an ugly bird, but you know. What is ugly? Well, with great effort, losing comes with great disappointment. and you're likely that your reward is going to be challenged. If you keep people busy in a dialogue for a long time, and you build up a basis, you have a relationship, and in the end you have to say, well, it's not you. There's quite a bit of disappointment there. What didn't help was that the company was just referring to that didn't really perform, basically had a very strong aversity towards the winner. They were cat and dog, right? That didn't help. So what happens then, and the longer the process, the more intense the process, the more expensive the process, you're likely to have a challenge. And the problem is with a normal procedure, it's all nicely regulated. You keep your nose clean, follow the book, check the box, and you're going to be there. The competitive dialogue, because it's so open, you have a lot more documentation floating about, and you have to be really careful about what it is that you do. So you have to check, and that is the check that you have to bear in mind from the very beginning. That is, on day one, and that's perhaps one of the weaknesses of the legislation, on day one you have to decide what your award criteria will be, which is a bit awkward because I don't know what the solution will look like. So how on earth will I be able to determine on day one what the criteria will be? Still, I have to do that. So you have to be sort of like creative, leaving enough room, right? Describing it at sufficient high level, sort of that you still have your hands free, and that you still have something relevant in terms of award criteria at the end of the day. Right? Another issue that you might see is that you run into a variety of innovations, a variety of solutions that cannot be compared, or that are very difficult to compare. And that is one of the key aspects, of course, of coming to an award, that whatever is being offered to you, that the offers as such can be compared. So that is something that you have to bear in mind. And then, of course, as I said, it's an intense process. There's workshops, there's demos, there's all sorts of things, various documents and various versions. And then the question is, what is documented? And what is it that I drag along into an award? Is it fair that, rather than asking for a test, because if I ask for a test during the dialogue, then it comes with red tape and all sorts of stuff. But then at least I have a test result which I can use in my award. If I ask for a demo, no test environment, just demonstrate that it works. Can I use the results of that demo? Can I use the reflections on that demo in my award? It's a difficult question. And you have to be very careful in writing your award that nothing slips in that shouldn't be there, because it was something you learned early in the process, and that may or may not have been captured in the offer. So you have to be very careful there. It's something where, I spent 20 months in this process, in this competitive dialogue. We actually lost 3 months in the end, because we saw that there was a risk. We picked up that there was this very nice relationship between those two players, and we actually hired a lawyer, an external counsel, to help us write the award, to make sure, with his experience and with him coming in from the outside, sort of not having been contaminated by the whole process, so that he could supervise and advise on what to write in the award and what not to write in the award. So we had a very intense 3 months process, actually writing the award, just to make sure that it was clean. It was something that would not be affected by this problem of contamination from whatever happened during the dialogue. But it was actually quite an intense process, those 3 months, and it became even more intense once we had the award, because then effectively the disappointed party went to court. That is to say, they went to the Council of State with an urgent request to stop the award. And then it becomes very intense, because it's an urgency procedure. They get 10 days to file a complaint or to file a request. And we then get, was it 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that, somewhere in between, to respond. And as they say in English, they threw everything but the kitchen sink at us. It was a 70-page request. So we hired a bunch of lawyers and wrote a 120-page back at them. And then the intervening party was the party that won the award, and who were extremely vexed with the whole thing because they already hated the other guy's guts, and then their nice award was being challenged. So they wrote another 60 pages. So in the end, it was it was quite an interesting procedure, but we won. That is to say, the award stood, the challenge was warded off. So in the end, we could go forward. Now, where are we in time? Okay, I'm still good. All right. Lessons learned, just a couple of lessons learned, right? Is the dialogue appropriate? Is the need to be met worth the effort? That's coming back to the idea, if you're waving with a budget of what, say 5 million euros, don't expect too much, right? Don't go into a 4-year procedure. It's not going to work, right? Market exploration. Actually, you're looking for players, you're looking for companies that might meet your need, but you're also marketing your process, you're marketing your project. And that is often forgotten. That is often something that buyers tend to forget. You really have to find these companies. You really have to go out to the market, talk to people, make them aware that we are going to launch something. Look at this space, right? There's going to be something interesting for you, and listen to these people. Marketing is a two-way process. Listen to these people, listen to their constraints, listen to their needs, listen to the fact, or be aware of the fact that you are talking to a company that may have 10 employees, and none of these 10 is a public procurement expert, right? So be very aware of who you're talking to and who you need in your solution. Project management is key. I've already stressed that. You need to run a tight process. Otherwise, you're gonna be lost somewhere in the desert. Mind the needs and constraints of the participants. Yes, I touched upon that. And then, of course, yes, I'm writing here document. You need to make sure that whatever you do, it is documented. During the procedure, one of the challenges that was thrown at us was, you didn't test the equipment of the winner as thoroughly as our equipment. Right, well, we didn't test any equipment, but we definitely ran demos, and we had a good look at the demos, and fortunately, we had minutes of the demo sessions. So we could go back to the court and say, look, here's a set of minutes from the test that you ran on the equipment of the winner, on the equipment of the one that was in second place, and the equipment of your plaintiff. There you are. So, but we were, actually lucky that we had that, and it was somewhere, it was stored. We knew we had these minutes of meeting and minutes of the demo, so we could use that. But it's very important to document. I would say what's also important is educate. Educate the people that show an interest, that want to participate to your procedure. Be very clear in terms of, this is going to last a year, this is going to last 15 months, this is going to last 2 years. Right, be very clear, be very open about that. We will require demos from you. We will require you to come to Brussels. We will require you to do this, do that. And then see, and I would almost say start to dialogue before the dialogue. Make sure that you will have the right set of participants in your dialogue. Make sure that you have a fair chance at that even before you kick off the dialogue. Right, that was me. Any questions? There's a couple of microphones in the room. I've got one here, and I was promised that there will be 2 lovely ladies in the room holding a microphone as well. Right. No one? Right. Okay. Either was so boring that you're all asleep. That is a possibility. Ah, there's somebody there? Okay, great. No.
Now?
Yeah, now I hear you.
Perfect.
I'm going to stand close to this box here.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for your presentation, because we just we wanted to do the competitive dialogue for our next innovation challenge, and I can relate to a lot of the things you said, and I have to say at some point we decided to stop the process because we lost our procurement department. So I work in the innovation department of the German Central Bank. And so at some point we lost our procurement department along the way. And so, but your lessons learned and also encouraging us, I think I would just bring it back to Frankfurt, and so that we will probably have another try the next round. And probably also another, but I have a question now.
Okay.
What about the other innovative procurement methods besides the competitive dialogue? Because I think in Germany, at least, we have 3 different ones. And how do you have experience with the others?
I personally have less experience, well, no experience with the others, but there's a person in the room here, and he's one of the next speakers, and he has experience with the innovation partnership. So that's the next step. In terms of your comment, that's very strange. I mean, normally it's us losing the others, not the other way around, right? But okay, it happens. Anyway, feel free to contact me. I think you got my details. If we can be of any help, by all means. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you.